User behavioral patterns, in other words, marketing is direct manipulation of people.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, what can we do? Well, it's true. If a person already has a problem and we identify that problem and we can offer them some kind of solution, then, well, maybe you could call that manipulation. But if the problem gets solved, then it's a useful kind of manipulation.
Please tell us about the beginning of your career path. What challenges did you face? What was difficult in the IT product world?
Well, honestly, the hardest thing at first was understanding the algorithms because it seemed like everything was written out, everything worked great, we could set up campaigns and all that. They told you how to do it. You launch it, but nothing actually starts. That was super hard, really so uncertain. You just didn't know what to do with it, didn't know how to hit the targets. So there was a lot of stress. Those first 3 months, my probation period, I was honestly really stressed out. It felt like nothing was working out for me because, the work was getting done, tasks were being closed, things were launching. It seemed like I was slowly figuring things out, but there weren't any really great results, and that was tough. But later on, actually, if I'm not mistaken, then near the end of my probation period, one of my creative ideas took off, and I was like, all right, I can live with this. So that was the first thing. Plus, there's definitely a certain specificity in communication. Because when we talk about other fields, for example, I came from working in more corporate environments, if you can call them that, and compared to this more startup vibe, there really is a difference. That is, you don't have a clearly defined career path. That was back then. Well, okay, maybe now there is. Back then, it wasn't written out like now you're a junior. To become a mid level, you had to work for a year, get a good performance review, things like that. Back then, there was nothing like that, and it was also a bit unclear how you were supposed to move forward, especially since there were a lot of examples of people who advanced pretty quickly. I was used to Deloitte, where you might get promoted once a year, and even then, not always. And of course, there's also the fact that you still need to dive much deeper into the product. Because when we worked there, when I worked in analytics, it was still mostly about working with numbers. You have a set of data, you analyze it, summarize it, make a nice Excel sheet, and then pass it on to the business side. Maybe they'll use your analytics, maybe they don't need it at all and just make decisions based on their gut feeling. Still, you end up digging deeper, understanding the nature of things more, and honestly, you have to keep a lot in your head. You need to know a bit about the product, a bit about analytics, understand how QA tests the product, and what kind of query to make. So, yeah, it was really interesting. But like I said, it's a really, really fascinating story. Back when I started, we didn't have separate roles, like user acquisition manager or creative marketer. We were all marketing specialists, and we handled everything: buying, creatives, and testing. And at some point, for some reason, we even started running product A/B tests. They were small ones, but we had that experience too. So yeah, it was interesting, intense, really intense. The first 2 years were definitely very intense.
You said you worked for 3 months and then you started working at companies. How much budget do you need to burn on a single marketer, or what's now called a user acquisition manager?
Yeah. Well, I can say this. Back then, everything was different because at that time, target costs worked well. There were different bidding strategies, and if your campaign wasn't performing, like if the creative wasn't successful, it just wouldn't take off. So now, of course, you need to invest a bit more, run bigger budgets. Well, it depends, of course, on the product and the company's approach. Because there are companies that just go all in, pour in the money, and then monitor the results over the course of a month. It can even be up to 100,000. And there are products that try to find some working creatives and optimize campaigns on minimal budgets. So in those cases, it might just be tens of thousands. It all depends.
So, how about you? Right now, how much would you say you hire a new colleague? How much time would you give them to learn? How much budget would you allocate for training people?
Well, I definitely wouldn't just look at the budget. It would depend on how the person works, their approach, how they test hypotheses, whether they're just stuck testing the same thing over and over, and then they say, nothing works for me. Well, of course that's a problem. But if a person is constantly looking for new approaches, new hypotheses, maybe even new advertising platforms, and gets more involved in the creative side, then that's a bit different. Because we work with products where a lot depends not just on marketing, but also on the product itself and the market. So here, the main thing is just how ready a person is for this, how willing they are to change, how open they are to changing certain products. Because for us, in this regard, it's actually pretty easy. If we see that something isn't working over a certain period of time, we can redirect that person's efforts to a project with more potential, where they can reveal their strengths better. So here, it really depends on the people, not, let's say, not on the budgets.